This story is set between Chicago and the beautiful paradise of Bali. It is the thrilling story of Jacob and his immigrant wife, Maria. Welcome to Hidden Family Crime Tales, where we bring you gripping, interesting true-life stories. Please tell us where you're watching from, and do well to hit the subscribe button for more real-life stories. Now let's continue with this thrilling story. Jacob was a 29-year-old software engineer from Chicago. Ambitious and hardworking, he had everything he wanted in life, except someone to share it with. During a business trip to Colombia, fate intervened. That's where he met Maria. She was 25, a vivacious woman with an undeniable energy. The kind of person who could light up a room without even trying. Their meeting wasn't a grand romantic gesture. It happened at a local cafe in Bogotá, where Maria worked as a server. Jacob had stopped in for coffee, but something about her smile kept him there longer than expected. When Maria approached to refill his cup, Jacob struck up a conversation. What started as small talk quickly turned into something more. Jacob invited Maria out the next evening. They went to a quiet corner cafe, where they talked for hours. Maria shared stories about her life in Colombia, her love for her family, her dreams of traveling, and her admiration for people who took risks. Jacob was captivated. He wasn't sure if it was her charisma or the fact that he had never met anyone so effortlessly authentic. Whatever it was, he knew he had to see her again. When his 2-week trip came to an end, Jacob returned to Chicago, but Maria wasn't far from his thoughts. He kept looking at her photo on his phone, replaying their conversations in his mind. He realized this wasn't just a fleeting holiday romance, it was something much deeper. Determined to explore this connection, Jacob made it a point to return to Colombia as often as he could. Over the next 2 years, Jacob's life revolved around flights, phone calls, and video chats. Maria would always be waiting for him at the Bogotá airport, her face lighting up the moment she saw him. Each visit deepened their bond, but long distance wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, frustration, and even jealousy. Yet, they held on, believing their love could overcome the distance. Jacob's family was supportive but skeptical. They questioned whether Maria truly cared for him or if she was just after an opportunity to move to the US. Jacob brushed off their concerns, trusting what he felt in his heart. Finally, after 2 years of navigating the challenges of their relationship, Jacob proposed during one of his visits. Maria said yes, tears streaming down her face. They held a small, intimate wedding in Bogotá, surrounded by her family and close friends. It was a new beginning, filled with promises of love and partnership. Soon after, Maria's visa was approved, and she packed her bags for Chicago. For Jacob, this was a dream come true. He was bringing the woman he loved to the city he called home. As they settled into their new life together, everything seemed perfect. They explored the city, created routines, and started building their future. But perfection can be deceptive, and some dreams hide the seeds of nightmares. The story of Jacob and Maria seemed like the kind of love we all hope for, one that defies distance and challenges. But as time went on, cracks began to form beneath the surface, and their happily ever after started slipping away. The first 2 years in Chicago were like a dream come true, or at least, that's what Jacob believed. He and Maria traveled to scenic destinations, indulged in Chicago's vibrant nightlife, and even started planning for a family. Their life seemed perfect from the outside, but perfection, as Jacob would soon learn, can be a mask hiding betrayal. It started with small things. Maria would step out to answer phone calls, claiming it was her mother or a friend from Bogotá. She became unusually protective of her phone, quickly locking it whenever Jacob walked into the room. At first, Jacob dismissed it as harmless. Everyone needs their privacy, he told himself. But the excuses began piling up. Late grocery store trips that took too long. Stories that didn't quite add up. A shadow of doubt began to creep into Jacob's mind. One evening, as Maria stepped into the shower, Jacob found himself staring at her phone on the nightstand. His heart pounded in his chest. He wasn't the type to snoop, but the nagging feeling wouldn't let him rest. With trembling hands, he unlocked her phone. What he found made his blood run cold. There were messages to someone named Liam, their neighbor. The texts weren't just friendly, they were intimate, filled with affectionate nicknames, flirtatious banter, and even plans for secret meetings. Jacob's hands shook as he scrolled, each message cutting deeper. Jacob wanted to confront her right then and there, but something held him back. Instead, he decided to watch and wait, determined to catch her in the act. He started noticing things he hadn't paid attention to before, The way Maria and Liam exchanged quick glances in the apartment hallway, the casual laughter that felt far too familiar. Every day, Jacob's love for Maria warred with his growing rage. He replayed memories of their time together, wondering how he had missed the signs. Was it all a lie? Was she ever truly his? One evening, they sat across from each other at dinner. Maria was smiling, her laughter echoing in their cozy apartment. To Jacob, it felt hollow. All he could think about was the betrayal. But Jacob didn't lash out. Instead, he began to plan. He knew a confrontation now would only lead to denial and more lies. He wanted a definitive moment, a way to expose the truth and make her feel the pain she had caused him. Then, an idea struck him. Christmas was around the corner, and he suggested they take a holiday trip to Bali. It would be the perfect opportunity to reconnect, he said. Maria, unaware of Jacob's suspicions, eagerly agreed. As they packed their bags and boarded the flight, Jacob masked his anger with a smile. But beneath the surface, he was seething. What Maria thought was a romantic getaway was something far more sinister. Jacob's plan was set in motion, and their dream holiday was about to turn into a nightmare. Christmas was approaching, and Jacob's offer of a trip to Bali seemed like a gesture of love and reconciliation. Maria, still oblivious to Jacob's discovery of her betrayal, jumped at the chance for an exotic escape. She imagined turquoise waters, luxurious villas, and rekindled romance. But for Jacob, this trip wasn't about healing, it was about confrontation. As they landed in Bali, Maria couldn't contain her excitement. "This is paradise," she exclaimed, snapping photos of the lush palm trees and clear skies. Jacob managed a smile, masking the storm brewing within him. They checked into an opulent villa perched on a cliff, with sweeping views of the ocean. The villa's beauty was mesmerizing: glass walls, a private infinity pool, and a serene atmosphere. Maria thought it was a sign of Jacob's devotion. To her, Jacob seemed like his usual self. He was attentive and thoughtful, holding her hand as they walked along the beach and planning candlelit dinners. But behind his calm exterior, Jacob's thoughts were dark, swirling with resentment and anger. For the first 4 days, they explored Bali's vibrant culture. They visited sacred temples, hiked to hidden waterfalls, and strolled through bustling markets. Maria, unaware of Jacob's simmering rage, laughed freely, basking in the illusion of their blissful holiday. Yet, cracks in Jacob's facade began to show. His temper flared over trivial matters: a delay in their dinner reservation or Maria taking too long to get ready. He would snap at her, his voice sharp, then immediately apologize, brushing it off as jet lag. Maria started to notice. On their third evening, as they sat by the pool under the stars, Jacob's distant demeanor unsettled Maria. She tried to lighten the mood. "What's wrong, cariño? You seem tense." Jacob looked up, his smile strained. "I'm fine. Just tired." But Maria wasn't convinced. She began watching him closely, noticing the way his jaw tightened whenever she spoke or how his gaze lingered on her phone when she wasn't looking. Once, she caught him glaring at her with an expression that sent chills down her spine. Her instincts whispered that something was wrong, but she pushed the thought aside, hoping the trip would bring them closer. By the 4th day, the tension between them was palpable. Jacob grew quieter, retreating into himself. Maria, confused and anxious, tried to bridge the gap, suggesting a romantic dinner by the beach. Jacob agreed, but his mind was elsewhere. This wasn't a vacation to him anymore, it was a carefully orchestrated setup. He was waiting for the right moment, the perfect time to confront Maria and unleash the storm he had been holding back. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the idyllic facade began to crumble. Beneath the beauty of Bali, something sinister was brewing. Maria thought she was living a dream, but Jacob was about to turn it into a nightmare. The mask was about to come off, and the truth would erupt in a way she could never have imagined. It was the night before Christmas, a time meant for peace and joy. But inside the villa, the atmosphere was anything but serene. Maria, unaware of the storm brewing, poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to Jacob. She mentioned Liam in passing, a casual remark about his dog, his hobbies, but it was enough to push Jacob over the edge. Jacob set his glass down, his hand trembling with barely restrained fury. His voice was low, chilling in its calmness. "So, you think I don't know about you and Liam?" he said, his eyes locking onto Maria's with an intensity that froze her in place. Maria blinked, confused at first, then alarmed. "Jacob, what are you talking about?" He pulled out his phone, scrolling furiously until he thrust it in her face. Screenshots of her messages to Liam filled the screen. Her words, once private, now hung in the air like a noose tightening around her neck. Maria's voice cracked as she tried to deny it, but Jacob wasn't listening. "Don't lie to me," he shouted, his voice echoing off the villa's walls. Finally, she broke down, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I made a mistake, but I never stopped loving you, Jacob. Please, let's fix this." But Jacob wasn't looking for reconciliation. Her confession was the final spark. Jacob's rage ignited, and he lunged at Maria. The first slap stunned her, the force sending her staggering into a chair. She screamed, but Jacob's fury was unrelenting. Furniture toppled as Maria tried to escape, grabbing at anything she could to shield herself. "Please, stop, Jacob, don't do this," she begged, her voice raw with fear. But his fists landed with brutal precision, fueled by months of suppressed anger and betrayal. The villa, once a sanctuary of luxury, became a scene of chaos, shattered glass, overturned chairs, and Maria's muffled cries. The noise wasn't contained to the villa. Nearby locals, drawn by the sounds of shouting and crashing, gathered outside. They banged on the door, shouting in Indonesian, "Open the door, what's going on?" Jacob ignored them, his mind consumed by a haze of fury. Maria, bloodied and barely conscious, whimpered from the corner of the room. The banging grew louder, and voices outside became frantic. Finally, a brave local man kicked the door open, rushing inside with a small group. They froze at the scene before them, Jacob, his hands bloodied, standing over Maria's crumpled form. Her face was bruised, her breathing shallow. Jacob backed away, his rage evaporating into shock as the realization of what he'd done sank in. The locals restrained him, shouting for someone to call the police. One woman knelt beside Maria, checking for signs of life. "Ambulance. Get an ambulance now." As the sirens wailed in the distance, Jacob slumped against the wall, his hands trembling. The villa, bathed in the soft glow of holiday lights, stood as a stark contrast to the horrors inside. Christmas Eve was no longer a celebration, it was a nightmare. Maria was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, her fate uncertain. And as the police arrived, handcuffing Jacob and leading him away, he muttered one sentence to himself: "What have I done?" But this wasn't the end. The nightmare was only beginning. Secrets yet to be revealed would twist the story further, leaving everyone questioning how things had gone so terribly wrong. The tranquility of Bali shattered with the sound of police sirens. Jacob, the man who once promised love and happiness, sat handcuffed in the back of a patrol car. His eyes, once full of charm, were hollow now, staring at the chaos he had unleashed. Meanwhile, Maria was rushed to the nearest hospital. Paramedics worked frantically to keep her stable. The doctors, assessing her critical condition, whispered among themselves about the severity of her injuries. Hours turned into an agonizing night as they fought to save her life. Jacob sat in a cold interrogation room at the local police station, his knuckles still stained with Maria's blood. When the detectives entered, he straightened, his confidence replaced by unease. "Why did you do it?" one officer demanded, slamming a folder of evidence on the table. Jacob's voice trembled. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." It was. An argument that went too far. But the investigators weren't buying it. The evidence against Jacob began to pile up. Witness statements from the locals who heard Maria's screams. Screenshots of his emails to travel agencies showing meticulous planning of the trip. And then, the laptop. Detectives uncovered chilling search history on Jacob's device. How to plan the perfect revenge. How to cover up an assault in a foreign country. Quick escape routes from Bali. The truth was undeniable. This wasn't a moment of passion or rage. Jacob had planned it. The romantic getaway was a facade, hiding his sinister intent. Days later, Maria's eyes fluttered open. She was alive, but the damage was extensive. Her face was swollen, her ribs fractured, her spirit bruised. Doctors surrounded her, speaking softly about her recovery. Maria's first words were faint but resolute. "Where's Jacob?" When told he was in custody, tears streamed down her cheeks, not out of sorrow, but relief. She vowed to rebuild her life, far from Jacob's shadow. "I won't let him take anything more from me," she whispered, her voice gaining strength. Back in the police station, Jacob's lawyer urged him to plead guilty. The evidence was overwhelming, and the prosecutors in Bali weren't lenient when it came to violence against women. Jacob refused at first, clinging to the idea that he was the victim of betrayal. But as the trial approached, reality set in. Maria, despite her injuries, provided a powerful testimony from her hospital bed. "What I did was wrong," she admitted, her voice firm. "But nothing justifies what he did to me." Jacob was sentenced to a lengthy prison term in Bali, far from the comforts of his Chicago home. The man who once controlled the narrative was now powerless, facing the consequences of his actions. As Jacob disappeared behind bars, Maria slowly pieced her life back together. With the help of her family and counseling, she began to heal. The pain remained, but so did her determination to live a life free of fear. What began as a story of love ended in betrayal, violence, and justice. Maria's affair had been a mistake, a lapse in judgment. But Jacob's response turned it into a nightmare that neither of them could escape unscathed. Love, trust, and betrayal. They can lead to unexpected endings. Maria found her strength, even in her darkest moment, while Jacob lost everything to his rage. This story reminds us that even in paradise, darkness can find its way in. What would you have done in Jacob's shoes? Could this tragedy have been avoided? Let us know your thoughts. If you enjoyed this gripping story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more real-life tales with unexpected twists. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.